All right, guys, good morning. We are taking a look at the new 2023 exclusive buyers brokerage engagement agreement. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can take a look at that. Here's the good news for this year. There's only one tiny little insignificant change. They added a clause that says NA means not applicable. That's it. Other than that, this is the same as 2022. So this is going to go pretty quick. Just going to go ahead and move through it. Now, if you're not familiar with the document already, I'm going to encourage you, like always, print this out, go page by page, highlight anything you do not understand. Call me, call the broker, make sure you understand everything that's in this contract. Now, it's divided up just like our listing agreement, just like our purchase and sale agreement, into three main categories, section A, B, and C. A being our fillable fields. This is our main part of the contract. This is what everybody looks at. All of our blanks have been brought to the first page. Section B is an explanation of what was on section A. So if we're wanting to know more about agency and brokerage and what that means, then we go to B3, and that's going to refer to agency and brokerage and give you all the details around it. Section C is just other terms and conditions, definitions, time is of the essence, things like that. Okay. Now, let's start working our way through it. It's going to start out with the term of this agreement shall begin on the date of. So that is our start date. That is the day that they actually hire you. If you do not have this form completed and signed by your client, they're not your client. They are a customer at best, and they have no obligation to make sure that you get paid in the transaction. So this is a document that ideally you're going to get your buyer to sign at your buyer's consultation, the appointment that you have with them before you go look at properties, before you start working together, where you explain to them what your value is in the transaction and why they want to work with you, and do that at a high level. The logical conclusion of that appointment is they're going to be happy to sign this document. So that date is typically going to be the date that you sit down with them for the first time. And it shall continue through the date of how long are you going to be their agent. And the timeline here is 100% negotiable. There's no standard. The thing that I would tell you is as markets shift, the length of time you want to have them committed to you may shift as well. We're in a market right now where the average days on market is probably 45, 60 days. Inventory is freeing up. Financing is still a little challenging with high interest rates, but it may take us a little bit longer than it did a year ago in order for us to find them the right home, or 2 years ago, or 3 years ago. So we may want to make sure that we're working together for 6 months. That would be a pretty typical term to put in here. But I'm perfectly okay with 3 months. I'm perfectly okay with 2 months. If the buyer is looking for very specific, I have had a buyer's brokerage agreement before that we signed a year agreement because the buyer was looking for something very specific, and we knew that it would take a while before it even showed up on the market. So use your discretion there. Paragraph 3 is agency and brokerage. And this being a buyer's brokerage agreement, most new agents are tempted to come and mark buyer's agency. But that is not what this paragraph says. What it says is the following are types of agency relationships not offered by the broker. Now, our broker does not offer dual agency, and it does not offer sub agency. So those are going to be the two that you're always going to mark. 3B says if broker offers dual agency as one of the agency relationships above, Buyer does or does not consent to broker acting in a dual agency capacity. So you don't have to answer this. However, I encourage you, go ahead and just mark does not consent to the broker acting in a dual capacity. We don't offer it, so we don't need their consent. So it's perfectly okay for them not to consent. If you don't mark it, compliance is going to flag it and ask you to get it marked. Legally, it doesn't matter, but mark it. Then we get down to commissions. This is our guarantee that we're going to get paid. Now, in Georgia, it is typical and common for the seller to pay the commission, or the seller's broker to pay a commission to the buyer's broker, but that doesn't always happen. We may be working with our buyer and they may find a for sale by owner, and that for sale by owner is not offering a commission at all. The only assurance that we have that we're going to get paid is when we come in here and we mark that we're expecting a 3% commission, or 2.5%, or 4%. It's all negotiable. Okay. But understand that if the seller does not pay the commission, the buyer is agreeing that they will pay the difference. Okay. And you'll read here, buyer agrees to pay the broker the commission set forth below at the closing of the contract to purchase, minus any commission paid to the broker by either the seller's broker or the seller. So if the other side is paying a commission, then the buyer's only going to be obligated to pay the difference between what you put here and what you didn't. Okay. Understand though, if you come in here and you say that we're committing that they're going to pay 0%, which is what some agents are tempted to do, or they don't have a buyer's brokerage agreement in place and the seller is not offering a commission. Well, if you didn't have a brokerage agreement, you're under no obligation to continue working with the client. But if you put 0% in here, you have obligated yourself. You signed a contract that says, I'm willing to work for this buyer to help them buy a house for whatever the seller is offering. And if the seller is offering 0, that's exactly what you get for all your hard work. So I encourage you to put 3 in here. Fight for your value. If you want to put 2.5, put 2.5. If you want to put 2, put 2. That's your decision. Just understand that you can never raise that later. The buyer's not going to agree once you find the perfect house to pay them more, but you can always forgive the difference. If they've agreed that you're going to get paid 3% and the seller is only offering 2.5%, and you're willing to accept the 2.5%, you don't have to hold the buyer's feet to the fire and have them pay the other 0.5%. But you can't ever go back and change that. So if you agree to 2% and the seller's only offering 2%, and it winds up that you have a very difficult buyer, it's a very difficult transaction, you can't go back later and say, hey, listen, this was tougher than I thought it was going to be. I really deserve 3%. So the thing I'd encourage you to do, go high initially, and if you need to forgive later, you certainly can. Paragraph 4C, separate commission on lease. My recommendation is to put NA in these. And if your buyer ends up entering into a lease purchase or becomes interested in a lease purchase agreement, or they decide that they can't buy and they're going to lease instead and want your help, at that time, do a tenant brokerage engagement agreement. There's not enough protection. There's not enough details. There's not enough definition to what that agent-tenant relationship is in this one paragraph. But if you feel compelled that you need to put something in here because maybe they're going to lease, well, you may come in here and put your flat rate and paid at completion of lease, okay, or at move in. You know, you pick the date. That's what they're asking when it says the dollar amount and as follows. The and as follows is when is that going to get paid? Then we get down here to the protected period. And typically I'm going to use 90 days. You may choose to use 60 days, 30 days. What that protected period is if you were the agent that introduced them to a home, showed them the home, the contract that we have, that this agreement, if it has terminated, so our termination date has passed and they're no longer obligated to us. The protected period says, hey, if I was the one that introduced you to this house, I'm still going to get paid by you for however many days. Now you go find a new house, I have nothing to do with that. But if it's one of the houses I introduced you to, I'm still to be your agent. Okay. Now that's all that we have to fill in here. Everything beyond that is explanations of what we looked at, and then the other terms and miscellaneous. So a couple of things that I want you to pay attention to in here are the brokerage policy, okay? Understanding the commissions. We need to read this paragraph and make sure we really understand the buyer's commission obligation. Read this paragraph and make sure you understand it because they're going to read it. Commissions on a property for sale by owner, and understand what the protected period is. Okay, you're not going to have to visit those very often, but what you will visit often is when you get pushback from a buyer on signing this document. Something that can be really helpful is here the broker's duties to the buyer and the buyer's duties. Okay, this helps you define why they want to sign it. Okay, if they do not sign a buyer's brokerage agreement, you're not held to this standard. When they sign this agreement, you are held to this standard. So they're going to make all disclosures required by law, tend to locate a property suitable for buyer for purchase, comply with applicable laws, and assist in the extent requested by buyer in negotiating the terms and filling out a pre-printed real estate purchase and sales agreement. So in the absence of this contract, you have no obligation to do any of that for the client. So it is in their best interest to do it. And then they have duties as well. Okay. So you want this document because this is the only document that guarantees that you're going to get paid. The reason the buyer wants this document is it holds you accountable to a certain standard and a certain behavior. There, you will hear incorrectly that this makes you the fiduciary for the buyer. That is a word I want you to strike from your vocabulary, because in Georgia, the agent does not have a fiduciary responsibility to the buyer unless they tell them that they have a fiduciary responsibility. Okay. So don't have that conversation. Okay. I want you to behave in that manner. I want you to act as if you're their fiduciary. That's how you best serve your client. But legally speaking, keep your liabilities to a minimum. We're then going to get down to the signature page. And again, all of this content, pages 2 through 5, I want you to go through and read all this and make sure you understand everything that's in it. Here at the bottom of page 6, we're going to mark any brochures that we intend to or have shared with the buyer. Okay, there's no obligation that you have to share these. Some of them are a good option to share with your buyer if you know they're looking at particular types of property. The thing that I wouldn't do is share all of them. If I send a buyer 300 pages of material and say, I thought this would be helpful for you, how much of that do you think they're going to read? Big fat goose egg. But if we send them one pamphlet or two pamphlets and say, hey, this is important information, I think you'll find this beneficial, the likelihood of them reading it goes up. The reason they're listed here on the agreement is we do want the buyer to know these are resources that are available to them. Okay, so again, don't have to share any of them. The one that you will never share, though, is the retainer fee exhibit. Our broker does not allow retainer fees. So if you have questions about that, concerned about that, certainly direct that at me or the broker. We have a space in here that we can add special stipulations. Okay, so anything that would deviate this contract or make a change to this contract that was not covered in any of the blanks. This could be that the buyer is looking to buy a particular property. They've already met with the seller. They're in negotiations. They're thinking they're going to buy that home. But if they don't, they want to hire you. Maybe we put a special stipulation in here that says this agreement is applicable to any transaction excluding the purchase of, and then whatever that address is. Okay. We then get down to the signature page. This is where we need to put all of our buyers' information. If we've got one or two buyers, if we have a third buyer, we can attach an additional page with their information. But everybody that's going to be on the loan needs to sign the buyer's brokerage agreement. Okay. If they're just going to be on title, but they're not going to be on the loan, this does not need to be signed by them. Okay. These are the people that are going to be obligated. The lender's not going to want to see somebody on the contract that's not on the loan. So we're only putting in here the loan. Now, on the purchase and sales agreement, when we get to that, I'm going to tell you only do the signature, the printed name, and the date. On this brokerage agreement, we need all their information. We need their address, their phone number, and their email, because this agreement is between the buyer and the broker. And if something happens to you, if you disappear, if you're unable to help the buyer, we need to be able to get in contact with them. We need to know how to reach them for delivery of earnest money, for delivery of notice, all of those sorts of things as a brokerage, because this is a contract between us as the broker and the buyer. You're the agent. You're going to fill that role as long as you're able. But if you're ever not able, we're still obligated. So we need to know how to get hold of them. Then we have the broker information, and all of this needs to be filled out except for the fax number. Unless you have a personal fax that you monitor on a daily basis, don't put a fax number in there, because anything you receive by fax is legally binding to you. And so someone sends you a counteroffer, somebody sends you a notice, if they fax it to you, it is assumed you've seen it if it has been received by your fax, whether you've seen it or not. And I don't know about you, but I have not received anything in a fax in over a decade, and have not sent anything by fax in over a decade. So I'm assuming you're in the same situation, so don't put a fax number in there. Everything else needs to be filled out. And then lastly, once everybody is signed and the buyer has a copy, we want to fill this in. Okay. Now, if you're going to sign this at the buyer's appointment, well, this is going to be pre-printed. You're not going to have a copy of it. You're going to have the one copy they signed at the appointment. So you're going to fill this in when you get back to the office, right as you're emailing a copy to your buyer, because they deserve to have a copy of this as well. If you are sending this for them to sign digitally, well, you can go ahead and fill this out. Even though they haven't signed it yet, fill it out for when they will be signing it. Okay, and we can put our time in here, and we can use a timestamp from your e-signature to verify that yes, they have a copy of it. And that's the whole document. So like I said, fairly easy one, but if you've got any questions about this, if you've got any questions about other structures for commission, certainly reach out to me. Just understand that what we cannot accept is any sort of commission other than cash. Okay, so we're not looking for a percentage of a deal. It can't be a dollar figure over a sales price. It can't be chickens or goats. We're looking for either a percentage of the sales price or a flat fee. So let's say that I was helping a buyer and a seller. They had already met, discussed, they know each other. One's the nephew, one's the uncle. The nephew's buying the uncle's home, but they need help with the contract and getting through the closing process. Well, maybe we don't charge them a percentage of the sales price. We charge them a flat rate. Okay. But this is always going to be a percentage or a flat rate. And with that said, guys, that wraps us up for today. Call me with any questions. Bye.